Well, a little while ago, Emily and I were in California, in the Lake Tahoe area, and we were able to spend about 2.5 weeks in that area, and I absolutely fell in love with it. Hadn't been there for over 30 years, and just discovered so much beauty and so much joy and such an incredible time. And we went on a number of hikes over those 2.5 weeks. And so the most memorable hike that we took was in Carson Pass. The pass lies on the Great Basin Divide, with the West Fork of the Carson River on the east and the South Fork of the American River on the west. The historic pass was a point on the Carson Trail during the historic California Gold Rush, and it was used during the American Civil War for shipping products to California. These rocks were outside a ranger station, and it's interesting. If you look on the left side of the rock, you see it's kind of brown. Well, that is rust from thousands of covered wagons brushing up against that rock. And that's actually rust from those covered wagons journeying to California. And of course, you know Emily, here she is. This is just before we started on this hike that I'm talking about today. And right at the trailhead is this historic marker. It's actually a landmark where the famous American frontiersman Kit Carson signed a tree back in 1844. And so he actually signed in the hole on the tree. He put his name and the date 1844. So we got on our way. Here's what the beginning of the trail looked like. It was a beautiful day, probably about 80 degrees. And the trail goes off to the left in the picture there, down into the valley where those mountains are, that you can see in the center of the picture. This is the first lake that we came to. This is called Frog Lake, a beautiful lake. And I took another picture of it so you could kind of see the whole lake. It's kind of up at the tree line. You notice the trees are very short here. And it's about the elevation where trees stop growing. And so we began this trip at 11 o'clock on September the 5th. It was a beautiful, warm day. And we were hiking to Lake Winnemucca. And I took this picture, kind of fun. This is a tree that had turned over sometime before. And when it fell over, it grabbed those rocks that are in the roots and brought them with it. I thought that was kind of fun. And then in the background is Lake Winnemucca. And here's more pictures of the lake. And there was snow just about at the elevation we were at. And there's a waterfall. You can't really see it, but it's on the far side of this picture. Just an absolutely gorgeous place. And so we walked around here and ate our lunch from just about this place here, and just had a really great, relaxing time enjoying this moment. And a little further up, we found some wildflowers that were growing. Spring happens very late up at this elevation, and so these were flowers, and Emily actually took this picture of some wildflowers. And so we stayed here for a while and had a great time, and then decided it was time to leave, and we headed back the way we'd come. And the hike, it was just about 6 miles, so we had 3 miles to return to where we started. And at about the 2-mile mark, the sky started gathering a few clouds. And it was kind of fun, and they were up sort of on one side of us, and there was a little bit of thunder and lightning, and we were joking that God must be upset, that he's rolling boulders around up in heaven, because we could hear this once in a while. And then it was interesting, the clouds started to get thicker. And pretty soon, the clouds are all around us. And now this intermittent thunder and lightning that we were experiencing is all around us. And it's going... And we're like, wow, this is really exciting. Wow, how cool is... Then it starts to sprinkle. And we're like, oh, wow, well, here we are. You saw how we're dressed in shorts and not really dressed for any kind of weather. And then it starts to rain heavier and heavier and heavier. And then it's pouring. And we are soaked to the bone in just a couple minutes. And then if that's not enough, then it starts to hail. And the hail is about the size of a pea. And it felt like some unseen person was throwing rocks at us. Because it was like, and we're, oh gosh, and then the water from all the rain is coming down the hill, and it's mixing with the pea hail, and it's forming a slush, right? And at first we were able to jump from rock to rock to try and stay dry, but eventually you couldn't even do that. It was like, well, what? There was so much water, so much hail that we just were having to step in the water, in the icy water, I have to tell you. And Emily took this picture. Remember this one? So this is just a half an hour later. And we got about 3 inches of hail. And this is me kind of saying, what in the hail is going on? And that is the title of this talk. And so from there, all these thoughts started racing through my head. Here we are. We think we're about a mile from where we started. The weather is feeling like it's getting treacherous. And there's a part of me that remembered the Donner Party. Do you remember that? And I'm thinking, oh, certainly I'm going to die. And, Emily couldn't be fazed. And at one point, it was so bad that I couldn't see where the trail was that we were on, right? Because there was so much hail and water on the ground, and we're walking through this meadow-like place, and it all looked the same. And I am freaking out. When she took that picture, I'm like, what are you doing taking pictures? Let's get out of here. And my mind was just racing, and I was freaking out. I really became afraid. And I looked at her, and she's like calm as a cucumber. In my mind, I don't know what I looked like, but I know on the inside my mind was racing. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to stop. I'm just going to take a breath. See if I can allow myself to calm down. Because my tendency, what do you want to do when something like this happens? You want to run. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to run. I didn't know which way I would run, but my body and my system was like, let's just get out of here. That's how we get in trouble, by the way, sometimes, is by following that fear and following that body reaction. And sometimes when we're fearful, we say and do things that we regret later. Ever notice? So then I thought, okay, so as I'm breathing, I'm slowing down, and I asked myself, what does this fear want to know? Because fear is like it's like a system. It feels like it's a part of us when it shows up. And so I said, okay, fear in Blaine, what do you want to know? And the fear said, I want to know that everything is okay. I want to know that I'm going to be able to get out of here. The fear said, I want to be loved. You know, that fearful part of us is like a child in us. And so often when we are afraid, we do just the opposite to that fear of what it needs. Oftentimes we run away from that fear. So instead I said, okay, I'm going to totally feel this fear. I'm going to totally embrace it. And I'm going to totally love it. Because it's like a small child. And when a small child is afraid, what does it want? It wants to be loved. And then I thought, okay, I'm sending love to my fear. What else can I do? What else do we teach? So I said an affirmation. And I said, I said, I am calm and relaxed. I know that I'm going to be okay. And then I breathed into that. And I also used what we call a denial, and that is to say, you know what, this fear, I feel it, but it has no power over me. I feel this fear of wanting to run. But I'm choosing not to let it control my life, not to give it the power. And then Emily and I talked, and we gathered that we were probably about a mile away from where we started, and certainly we could make it a mile. And it's interesting, about that time the trail became obvious. So we started following the trail. When I relaxed, she probably saw it all the way along, but when I relaxed, I could see the trail. And we followed the trail. And here's where we ended up. This is where we started the hike. And that water in the foreground is about 6 inches deep. And so we got in our car soaking wet and turned up the heater and were able to go home. Wow. What the hell is going on? It's natural to be afraid. Every creature has some version of fear and experiences fear in some way. But we've been taught in our culture it's not okay to be afraid. Right? We teach our children not to look at it when they're afraid. Our parents probably taught me not to look at the things that we're afraid of. Being afraid is a natural reaction. Fear arises from our limbic system, which is responsible for the 4 F's of survival: feeding, fighting, fleeing, and reproduction. Fear is not the enemy. Fear is a clue that something is going on. Fear is an opportunity for us to change our thinking. You never thought I'd say that on a Sunday morning, did you? I know. Fear is a wake-up call that says, okay, pay attention. Something in what you are holding or doing isn't the truth. You're holding on to false evidence that isn't true, isn't real. Fear, F-E-A-R, false evidence appearing real. Fear is not the enemy. Fear is actually our protector. Fear does become troublesome when we focus so much of our attention on it and we let it take us out of bounds. When we let it get into our thoughts and we have these thoughts about, I'm never going to be good enough. I'm never going to be able to complete this. I'm never going to finish this talk. All these fearful thoughts can snowball and cause us more trouble than the situation that we're actually in. And so often our fear comes from our imagination. There's a story that I like about a monk in a monastery. And he's in a monastery in Great Britain. And he describes how he is very fearless. This monk could pull out other people's teeth without using anesthesia. And he, in fact, had very bad teeth himself. And he would pull his own teeth out without any anesthetic. In fact, he was seen outside the monastery workshop holding a freshly pulled tooth smeared with blood. He was holding it with an ordinary pair of pliers. He cleaned the pliers of blood before he returned to the workshop. A monk asked him how he could even manage to do such a thing. And what he said exemplifies fear. He said this: "When I decided to pull out my own tooth, it was such a hassle going all the way to the dentist that pulling out my tooth, the idea of pulling out my tooth didn't hurt. When I decided to go to the workshop, that didn't hurt. When I picked up the pair of pliers, that didn't hurt. When I hold the tooth in the grip of the pliers, that didn't hurt either. When I wiggled the tooth back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and then pulled it out, it hurt, but only for about 5 seconds. Once the tooth was out, it didn't hurt much at all. There was really only 5 seconds of pain." I bet you, my friends, are experiencing more pain than the monk did, because you have created that pain with your imagination. Mark Twain famously said, or maybe didn't actually say, "The worst things in my life never actually happened." Isn't that true? And he probably had worse things in his life than whether or not this quote was really his or not, but there is some conjecture about that. Unity's co-founder, Myrtle Fillmore, wrote, "You do not have a problem except the one that is in your own mind, and you put it there." We have about 60,000 thoughts a day. And over 95% of the thoughts that we have today are the same thoughts that we had yesterday. Yeah? And we think we're so original, don't we? And many of the thoughts that we have today are about worrying about things that aren't even real. Yeah? What kind of traffic we're going to run into? What am I going to say when I see this person? How am I going to act? What am I going to do? You ever get those kind of things that's going on constantly? Almost like, wow, there's this crazy tape going on. The crazy mother-in-law upstairs is just reciting all this crazy stuff all of the time in our minds. What the hell is going on? We get hooked by our fear. We get hooked by our crazy thoughts. We get hooked in the idea of unworthiness. Most of the fearful thoughts that we have are about believing that we're not worthy. The most common fearful thought is about personal insufficiency and worry and fear. The Washington Post had a T-shirt award. The winning T-shirt said, "I have occasional delusions of adequacy." Is that true? Why is that? Why isn't it the other way around? Have occasional delusions of inadequacy. But we tend, Rick Hansen said that our brains are like Velcro to negative thoughts, and what's the slick word he used? Teflon to positive thoughts. Rumi said, and this is from his poem, The Night Air. Which reminds me of the mother who tells her child, when you are walking through the graveyard and you seek the boogeyman, or when you see the boogeyman, run at it and it will run away. But what replies the child if the boogeyman's mother has told it to do the same thing? Boogeymen have mothers too. So what we're really talking about is developing a relationship with our fear and not thinking that we have to run away from it, but instead to lean into it and to ask it, why are you here? What are you here to tell me? What can I know? We cannot transform our relationship with fear unless we pause and get to know it. Interesting, huh? Opposite of what we were told. We can lean into the fear. Why are you here? What do you want to tell me? What can I know? What are you here to teach me? So I've got some ideas. Here's a spiritual practice that you can use to transform your relationship with fear. The first one is to stop. When you're feeling fear, to stop and take a breath. Recognize, wow, fear is in the room. Isn't that interesting? And take a breath. Let yourself be with it. The second thing you can do is to allow yourself to feel the fear in your body. Where is it? Often mine shows up around here or in my shoulders. Interesting. The fear is in my body. And then just pay attention to it. Rather than running away or pushing it away, just recognize that it's there. Henry David Thoreau wrote, "If a dog runs for you, whistle for it." So instead of trying to chase it away, getting angry, whistle. Come here, come here, come here. Don't you imagine that might just change the dog? And the third thing we can do is turn towards the higher power. When you feel fear, to ask yourself, okay, what is my spiritual practice that I can practice right now? You can use a denial and say, this fear has no power over me. Or an affirmation, I am strong and healthy and powerful and centered right now. I often like to use the prayer for protection. I used it numerous times this week when I had cataract surgery. And I'm looking up into the laser in this microscope, and this doctor is removing the lens from my eye. I prayed the prayer for protection over and over and over, over and over and over. And the thing is saying, removing sector 1, removing sector 2, sector 3, sector 4, and then it's like I see nothing. And the doctor says, okay, now I'm putting your lens, your new lens in your eye. The light of God surrounds me, the love of God enfolds me, and I'm looking into the light. But I get great comfort from spiritual practice. Focus on being the presence of God and knowing that that presence is right now. That is the truth of who you are. You are not separate from God. God is not separate from you. You are the very essence of God. Do you feel the power in that? Do you believe that? We weren't, all of us, grown up to believe that, or didn't grow up knowing that truth. It's considered blasphemous in the church I grew up in. But that is the truth. Knowing that gives you power. Focus on being the presence of God. Trust the ocean. Do not be afraid of the waves. Myrtle Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, said, "There are no discords in my being. Being is peace." I'd like to read this poem to you. It's titled, "When You Face Your Fears" by Steve Taylor. When you avoid your fears, they grow and you diminish. Your soul contracts a little more, leaving less space for light to reach you, and you become darker and colder inside. But when you face your fears, you grow and they diminish. Your soul opens up like a flower to the sun. When you face your fears, you discover that the reality isn't nearly as painful as you anticipated, that your anxiety is nowhere near as intense as you expected. When you face your fears, you find that you're stronger than you realized, that there are secret reserves inside you, waiting for moments like this to be called upon, to rise to the surface and reinforce you. When you face your fears, you learn that your ego is an unreliable narrator who distorts the facts and exaggerates for effect and always overstates danger and difficulty and always underestimates you. When you face your fears, you learn that you can't trust your thoughts, but you can trust your soul to adapt and cope and even overcome your fears. When you face your fears, you realize that your mind's projections and anticipations are more painful than any situation that your thoughts cause, and much more suffering than reality itself. I rejoice in the blessings of this present moment. I invite you to close your eyes. And take a deep breath, breathing into this moment. Knowing that the presence of love is right here in this moment. Breathing in and relaxing. All life is a gift. Even fear is a gift. Our fear comes to us as a teacher. When you are afraid, don't run. Rather lean in. You might ask your fear, what is it that I can know? What are you here to teach me? Breathing in and breathing out. When afraid, remember the breath. Breathing deeply calms the body and soothes the mind. Breathing in, breathing out. When afraid, where is the fear? What are you here to tell me? What must I know? I send you love. I take heed of your message. I know that ultimately you have no power over me. For I am free. I am unlimited. Thoughts of fear cannot bind me. For I am free. Loving Spirit, I know that you're right here in this moment, giving me the strength, the power, the love that it exudes from my innermost truth, my beingness, my soul. And now let's take a moment to turn within, to be one with the presence of Spirit. Gently allow your awareness to begin to return to this moment. Aware of your breath, aware of God, of truth, of love. You are free. You are unlimited. Where I live, there are rain.